Did you know some of the things you use every day were created because of World War I? Zippers, wristwatches, blood banks, even drones. What if I told you modern fitness, hygiene products, and even how we tell time were shaped on the battlefield? These inventions weren't made for comfort, they were made to survive. So stay with me, because the war that changed the world also created the everyday things you never knew came from it.
Did you know the zipper wasn't even called a zipper at first? It sounds strange, but before 1923, this everyday object went by the name hookless fastener. Not very catchy, right? So how did something with such a boring name become one of the most important inventions in clothing? The story actually begins during World War I, when an inventor named Gideon Sunback perfected the design. At the time, soldiers and sailors faced a surprising problem: many military uniforms didn't have proper pockets. So where did they keep their money and valuables? That's where zippered money belts came in, and those became the first large-scale use of the zipper. Now here's the interesting part. While buttons were still the official standard on most military uniforms, zippers quietly found their way into aviators' flying suits. And think about it, when you're flying at high speeds and freezing temperatures, would you really want to fumble with buttons? People quickly realized how fast, secure, and convenient zippers were. And when the B.F. Goodrich Company finally coined the word zipper in 1923, the invention's popularity exploded. By the 1920s, zippers weren't just for the military anymore, they were everywhere. So the next time you zip up your jacket or bag, ask yourself, did you ever imagine this simple motion was born out of war and necessity?
Did you know that before World War I, most men didn't wear wristwatches at all? And did you know wristwatches were once considered only a women's fashion accessory? Before the war, men usually carried pocket watches attached to chains. They looked stylish, but they weren't practical, especially on the battlefield. Imagine being in a trench, under pressure, trying to pull a watch out of your pocket just to check the time. During World War I, timing became extremely important. Soldiers had to coordinate attacks, officers had to give orders at the exact moment, and every second mattered. It was much faster and safer to glance at a wristwatch than to use a pocket watch, especially for officers who might be holding a gun in one hand and a whistle in the other. Wristwatches also became essential for aviators. Pilots needed both hands at all times while flying, so a pocket watch was completely useless. A watch worn on the wrist allowed them to keep track of time without losing control of their aircraft. By the end of the war, wristwatches had proven their value in real combat situations. Men no longer saw them as just decorative accessories. They were practical, reliable, and necessary. After World War I, wristwatches quickly gained acceptance as part of men's everyday fashion, changing how people around the world told time forever. So next time you look at your watch, ask yourself, did you know this everyday item earned its place during World War I? Did you know modern sanitary pads actually came from World War I? And did you know they were never meant for women at first? In 1914, during a European tour, executives from a company called Kimberly-Clark discovered a new material made from processed wood pulp. It was 5 times more absorbent than cotton and much cheaper to produce. When World War I began, cotton became scarce. So the company turned this new material into a product called Cotton and sold it to the American military as surgical dressings for wounded soldiers. But here's the surprising part: Red Cross nurses discovered another use. They began using Cotton as makeshift sanitary pads because it was highly absorbent and disposable. After the war ended, Kimberly-Clark bought back the leftover supplies from the military. In 1920, they launched their first commercial product called Kotex, short for cotton texture. At first, many stores refused to sell it, and magazines didn't want to advertise it. But once people accepted the idea, it completely changed women's hygiene forever. So tell me, did you know a product designed for the battlefield ended up becoming an everyday essential? After developing Cotton during the war, Kimberly-Clark kept experimenting with the material. They even tested a thin version of it for gas mask filters. In 1924, the company launched this soft, flattened material as a disposable makeup and cold cream remover for women. They called it kleenex, combining the word clean with the K and X from Kotex. But then something unexpected happened. Women began complaining that their husbands were using Kleenex to blow their noses. Instead of stopping it, the company saw an opportunity. Kleenex was soon marketed as a disposable handkerchief, a cleaner option that helped prevent the spread of germs. So next time you grab a tissue, ask yourself, did you know this everyday product evolved from World War I materials and a simple customer complaint? When you hear the words trench coat, you probably think of fashion, but did you know this iconic coat actually began on the battlefields of World War I? Before the war, British soldiers wore long, heavy wool overcoats. They were warm, sure, but once they got wet, they became heavy, uncomfortable, and miserable to wear in the muddy trenches. That's when something better was needed. The origin of the trench coat goes back to the early 1900s, when British clothing companies like Burberry and Aquascutum started experimenting with lighter, waterproof fabrics. One of these was gabardine, a water-resistant material invented by Thomas Burberry. When World War I began in 1914, British officers quickly adopted these coats because they were lighter, more flexible, and far better at keeping them dry and warm. So why were they called trench coats? Because they were perfectly designed for trench warfare. They included smart features like belts, shoulder straps, and metal rings to carry weapons, binoculars, and map cases, all while allowing soldiers to move more easily. And here is another interesting twist. Did you know trench coats didn't stay on the battlefield for long? Just months after the war started, London stores were already selling them to civilians. After the war, returning soldiers kept wearing them, turning a practical military invention into a timeless fashion icon we still see today. Did you know blood banks didn't exist before World War I? And can you imagine how risky blood transfusions were back then? Before World War I, doctors rarely performed blood transfusions. They didn't fully understand blood types, and there was no safe way to store blood. But the war changed everything. In 1917, a U.S. Army doctor named Captain Oswald Robertson, working with the British Army, created the world's first blood bank on the Western Front. His goal was simple but life-saving: to keep a supply of blood as close to the battlefield as possible for wounded soldiers. To make this work, blood was stored on ice and could last up to 28 days. Doctors also added sodium citrate to stop the blood from clotting. This allowed blood to be saved, transported, and used when it was needed most. So next time you hear about blood banks, ask yourself, did you know this life-saving system was created during World War I to save soldiers' lives? During the war, the British military needed stronger metals for their guns, materials that wouldn't bend or wear out from heat and friction. While working on this problem, an English metallurgist named Harry Brearley made an important discovery. He found that adding chromium to molten iron created a type of steel that didn't rust. Interestingly, this new metal wasn't used for guns after all. But during World War I, stainless steel quickly found other uses. It was used in aircraft engines, military mess kits, and medical instruments, where being strong and rust-free was extremely important. After the war, its advantages became clear, and stainless steel soon became popular around the world. So next time you see stainless steel in your kitchen or hospital, ask yourself, did you know this everyday material became popular because of World War I? Did you know this idea is actually hundreds of years old? And did you know it became popular because of World War I? Long before the war, people noticed that waking up earlier in summer could save energy. Even Benjamin Franklin talked about this idea, but nothing really changed until World War I began. In April 1916, Germany became the first country to officially introduce daylight saving time. Why? To save coal during the war. By moving the clocks forward, factories and homes could use more natural daylight in the evening and burn less fuel. Soon after that, the United Kingdom followed the idea, and then other European countries joined in. In 1918, the United States also adopted daylight saving time as a wartime measure. But what about today? Do countries still use it? Yes, many of them do. Did you know that? Almost all countries in Europe, like the UK, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain, still change their clocks every year. The United States and Canada also use daylight saving time, with a few exceptions in some regions. In the Southern Hemisphere, Australia and New Zealand follow it during their summer months. Even parts of South America, like Chile and Paraguay, still use daylight saving time today. Less than 15 years after the Wright brothers' first flight, Orville Wright was already helping the American military experiment with unmanned aircraft. The idea was simple but revolutionary: an aircraft that could fly without a pilot on board. These experiments were supervised by an inventor named Charles Kettering. In 1918, his team successfully tested an unmanned flying weapon called the Kettering Bug. This early drone could travel up to 75 miles and strike a distant target. It was launched using a track and dolly system, not a runway. Surprisingly, the aircraft was made from paper mache and cardboard, making it lightweight and inexpensive. So how did it know where to go? The Kettering bug used a gyroscope and a barometer to control its direction and distance. Advanced technology for its time. However, the war ended before the drone could be fully developed for combat. Still, the idea was proven. So next time you hear about modern drones, ask yourself, did you know their origins trace back to World War I experiments over a century ago? Did you know Pilates was created because of World War I? And did you know it began inside an internment camp? Joseph Pilates was a German bodybuilder who worked as a circus performer and boxer in Great Britain. As a child, he was weak and often sick, so he trained himself using bodybuilding, martial arts, and even yoga to become stronger. When World War I began, Pilates was interned as an enemy alien on the Isle of Man. Instead of giving up, he used his time to develop a new system of exercise. He called it contrology, a method focused on slow, precise movements and full body control. He even helped injured and bedridden internees by attaching springs and straps to their beds, allowing them to exercise and rebuild strength without standing up. After the war, Pilates moved to the United States. In 1925, he opened an exercise studio in New York City. Over time, his training method became known by his last name, Pilates. So next time you hear about Pilates, ask yourself, did you know this popular workout was born from World War I hardship?